This is the jpeg2RAW podcast. I'm Mike Howard. I'm broadcasting from the basement of Knob Studios here in sunny and hot Atlanta. jpeg2RAW is a photography podcast for the amateur photographer. You can find us on the web at www.knobstudios.com, and you can contact the show by emailing us at podcast@knobstudios.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Flickr, and Twitter by searching for jpeg2RAW, or just follow the links on our website. This is show number 9, Tim. We're one show away from show number 10, which is kind of a milestone. I think 10 is a milestone. This is show number 9, jpeg2RAW. I'm your host, Mike Howard, and I'm joined tonight again by Tim Kemperle, co-host. How are you doing, Tim?
Very good. How about yourself?
I am doing great. We're having some wonderful weather down here in Atlanta, and I'm going to have to. I was telling my wife the little recording intro I do for the show, not here on live, but I do if you're picking up the podcast on well, however you get podcast. The intro I do says broadcasting from sunny and hot Atlanta, and we're not hot right now. The weather is beautiful. I love, not only is the trees getting to where they're about to, lose their leaves and get some, some wonderful colors, but the weather, I love the cooler weather that's coming. And it's almost like Labor Day was almost a hard line in the sand. We were 90 plus, and right at Labor Day, bam, we haven't had another 90-day the whole time. It has just been, wonderful weather.
Well, we definitely cooled off up here in New York over the past week. It dropped down to 48 degrees in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow. That's even better than us. I think we got into the 50s at some point, and our highs have been either in the high 70s or low 80s for the day. That's not bad at all. And I think I've mentioned before, my air conditioner's broken in my truck, and I keep telling my wife, yeah, it seems to be working better every day. So tonight, we're going to talk about some sports photography.
Correct.
And that is from, the perspective of Tim and I. I don't know about you, Tim, but I don't see myself ever shooting on the sidelines of a pro football game or pro basketball game. So we're talking more from, going to your kid's sporting event or something like that, a high school sporting event or your 5-year-old's soccer game, something like that. I don't know. Do you have any aspirations to shoot at a pro football game?
No, heck, I don't even want to go to a pro football game. It's easy to watch it on TV.
It is, yeah.
Unless you get those great seats that they can get, it's not worth it.
So before we get into the show, we generally go over some news. There's not a lot of news that I had found this week. I do have a little bit, but I also wanted to mention, I mentioned about getting how you get the podcast. So we have the audio podcast, which I think that's what most people do. If you're like me, you listen to the podcast while you're doing something else. I listen to most of my podcasts as I'm driving into work, especially like this morning. I think I got through 3 different podcasts on the way into work this morning because there must have been some accident and traffic was horrendous. So I was able to make it through 3 different podcasts this morning. But we also have 2 video feeds, and I'm considering a third one, but the 2 right now are video large, video small. So, if you're listening to us on the audio podcast, you're having to rely on Tim and I describing the photo we're talking about, and we try and do that. We don't always do a great job of it, but if you get the video feed, you can see what photos we're talking about. I also try and put most of the photos we talk about into the show notes. Now, Tim, I think last time we talked, I was several shows behind in getting them published.
And you got quite a few out this week.
I've actually had them done faster than that. I put them on a timer. You can time when the post goes out. So I had it timed to like noon each day. So there's going to be another one go out noon tomorrow. And then hopefully this one will be by Thursday. Part of the reason I was able to get them done so much faster is I've skimped on the show notes. So I got to go back and fix up the show notes. But that'll come later. We don't have as many people go to the show notes. But if you want to go check out the show notes, if you listen to the audio podcast and you want to go look at some of the stuff that Tim and I, or if when we have a guest come on, have talked about, you can head out there. So going into, oh, one more thing before we get started. I had been using VidBlaster. It makes the software for the broadcasting, and not that we want to get too much into that. It had a lot of advantage. I really loved it, but we're going back tonight to see how it works to Procaster because it allows me to zoom in on the screen a little bit differently. And I think that'll be helpful when we get into some Lightroom stuff on a different show. Or like tonight, I'll be able to move it around. So it won't be quite as smooth moving around, but it will be, I think, more useful. So the news I had is just two things. And let me move the thing over here. Is, you know, we're going to be talking about taking photos at like a park or something like that, a sports park like a soccer field or a gym or something like that. And there's an article published on ACLU. Not that I'm a big fan there, but an ACLU site talking about photographers' rights. I'll put a note in the show notes, and it's interesting to read, what your rights are as a photographer, because in a lot of cases, um, those are under attack and saying that you can't take photos in certain areas. My general philosophy is I don't want to ever get arrested. Uh,
Yeah, really.
I'm not a big protester. If that's your thing, that's fine. That's not mine. So generally, if the police are going to tell me to not take a photo, then I will stop and not take the photo. But it's still interesting to hear know your rights, because sometimes you may run into a security guard who's a little overzealous. I do think that while you have the right to go to a public soccer field and take photos, it might be a little creepy if you're taking photos of kids and you don't even have any kids. I would try and find a friend of yours and go take the photos of their team.
Absolutely. People
Yeah,
will start questioning if they see you show up to games and you're not without kids or you don't know anybody that's there.
yeah, yeah. So that's an interesting read, is to know about your rights as a photographer. The other thing is not so much news. It's just something interesting I found, and that is, you know, Tim, do you ever use a lens hood for your
Y-
lenses?
Yeah, whenever pretty much every time I'm outside, I use it. Most of my lenses have came with it, so I do use it outside.
Yeah, so I found this link to, if let's say you lose a lens hood or you crack your lens hood or whatever, it doesn't work anymore, you can print out a new one. Yeah, I said print. I don't know how this
That's
thing
interesting.
works. And maybe I can zoom in on it even further so you can see what's happening here. Uh, it looks like it's like a styrofoam almost lens hood, and I guess it'll work just fine. The point of a lens hood is to bring that light in directly in through the lens, and not let it bounce around. Um, and
Right,
there,
and
and
prevent
this,
that sun glare also.
yeah, to prevent that sun glare from coming in at an angle. You want that light to come in at the right angle, and that's what the lens hood does. It does, also helps protect it. But I thought that's very interesting. It's a styrofoam looking lens hood. You can create your own. And from reading what they were talking about here, you you basically had designs for almost for tons of lenses for tons of different camera types.
That is interesting.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Thankfully, I haven't lost one yet.
I haven't either. I've been very careful with mine and have not damaged any of mine. I've thought before, sometimes when you go to take it off and put it back on the lens, backwards, and I go to twist it, I've thought, oh crap, I might have twisted that a little too tight and broke it. But those they're a little more durable than I guess I thought. And fortunately, I have not broken mine, any of mine yet. They've all still there doing work and doing good. And I generally use them unless it's dark. I generally use them all the time.
Right. Well, I also like it because in case you bang your camera off something, it's protecting the front of your lens.
Right. And sometimes when I'm around smaller kids, a lot of times they like to come up to it, and that lens hood gives a little bit more distance between their fingers going right on top of the lens.
Exactly.
And I do have, like we talked about before, I have a filter on the front of that, but still, I would rather not kids putting their fingers all over it.
No, that is something else you got to clean.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to talk about sports photography. And I don't have these in separated by your shots, my shots. They were kind of co-mingled, which is fine. But I think I did separate them by subject, subject. You sent some baseball ones. I have some softball ones. I also have, I think, basketball and soccer, and you had soccer too, I believe.
Right. Had a
So
couple.
so what all sports have you shot?
Uh, I guess the most is my son's been in soccer and baseball recently, so he's in. That's the sports I've been really into. I had taken a volleyball years ago, but the lighting was never well, and I was never pleased with the pictures, and probably never really went forward with that. And then also basketball. It was a winter league indoors, so the lighting was terrible. I think it's those sodium lights.
Yeah.
Just never ever got some good pictures out of it. My best pictures have always been soccer and baseball because the lighting is usually good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's right. Both soccer and baseball outdoors, the lighting is generally very good. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had some soccer games that were 8 in the morning, and sometimes the lighting, especially if it's going to be an overcast day, an 8 in the morning game
Hmm.
is not good lighting. It's I'm shooting ISO 1600,
Oof.
and still not getting great shutter speeds. I may be getting a shutter speed of somewhere around 1 300, 1 400,
Wow.
which even at ISO 1600, and that's not going to be enough to stop all the action. So what sport have you shot the most? Would you say?
Uh, I would say the most I've taken was probably baseball. And not well, and but now my son has given up on baseball and it's all soccer. So I would say it's going to switch over rather quickly now to probably all soccer.
Okay.
But baseball was actually probably the easiest of the two sports to take shots of because people stay in specific places. Like if you want to take a picture of the pitcher or you want to get pictures of the batter, you know what? They don't move. Getting that action shot in the field, that has always been a challenge, especially in my son when he was 9 years and younger. You don't know where the ball's going off in, if they even hit the ball a lot of times.
Right.
So then by the time you swing the camera around, the play's half made or your camera didn't focus on it, so the picture's kind of useless.
So let's you brought up something that reminded me of something. The focusing, and I don't know, maybe everybody has heard of this, maybe not. How do you focus using the actual shutter button, or do you focus using the back button?
I use the shutter button. I think it's the I think Canon has there's a back button. That they don't have that on the Sony. Actually,
Okay.
I only heard about that recently.
And I'm pulling something up here that is actually the back of, it's not my physical camera, but it is like my camera. And so what I did when I've taken a lot of soccer photos, probably upwards of 50, 60,000 or more, maybe 100,000
Oh
soccer
man.
images. Yes. I've taken a lot. And I learned this from, I think early on, I learned it from one of the pro shooters. And this is a Nikon D2X. We're looking at the back of a Nikon D2X. And I think this is the case with the non-Nikons, and I believe Canons also have a similar button. You said your Sony does not. I'm not familiar with the Sonys, so I don't know if it's just your model or if it's all Sonys.
I don't know of any Sony
Or
that has it.
okay, so you've investigated it, and they don't have an option like this at all.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. And the
Okay,
first time I saw it, I was actually using a friend's camera to take a picture of him, and he had a Canon, and I went to focus, and he's like, "No, you got to press the button on the back." I was like, "What button on the back?" So I
yeah,
never even had heard of it until probably a year ago.
that is yeah. If you hand your camera off to somebody who doesn't know about it, they will like, why isn't this thing focusing? It won't do anything. I'm pressing the button, it won't do anything. So what I have done is move the focus onto the back of the camera. There's a button on the back of my camera that says AF-on. And it's actually, since my D2X has both the horizontal and the vertical shutter, there's actually another AF-on the bottom of the camera, which would be the top when you turn it vertical. And that button is solely for focusing. So, and you get it down pretty fast. So what I'm doing is I'm tracking a soccer player or whatever. I can hit that focus button and just hold it down as I'm doing that. And then whenever I want to take the picture, I just click the shutter. Just click the shutter. And the other advantage is, let's say if you're taking a shot of a batter, going back to softball, if you're taking a shot of a batter, you can press that button, focus in on him or her, and then let go of the focus button and not worry about it again. As long as you're using enough of an aperture to have a decent depth of field there, they're going to stay within that depth of field, and you can just sit there with your shutter button and hit it, and maybe be a little more consistent in getting closer to bats on balls. Bats on balls difficult, very difficult, but
Right.
maybe maybe you have one less distraction. It also helps that you can focus on the player, and then let's say you got the batter, you focus on the batter, you let go of the button, and then you move the camera slightly to the left so that the batter is at the back end, the right end of your screen. So they're looking forward, they're looking to the blank spot of your what you're capturing, and you can get maybe that swing coming across. You don't have to worry about focus picking up on the fence behind them or anything like that. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. But one thing also, what the Sony does have instead of the back focus button, it's got when I put my eye up to the viewfinder in the back and I'm holding the grip on the right hand side, it will automatically start focusing. So it's kind of doing it, but differently than this. So it's automatically focusing prior to me pressing down on the shutter speed on the shutter.
It is focusing when you put your eye up to it.
Yeah, it's called iStart on the Sony. So I guess it's kind of a I guess it kind of does what you're doing, but there are two little infrared sensors on the back of the viewfinder, and
Yeah.
along the grip on the right hand side, there's two metal strips that when the two of them are kind of contacted, like my face is up against the back of the camera and I'm holding onto the grip, it will automatically start focusing.
Wow, I've never heard of that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that was something Minolta had done. Now I have read that I think the European models of the camera they had to change the metal strips on the right hand side. The European Union didn't agree with the strips, so that had to be moved off.
Hmm. Now, is that something you can turn on and off? Let's say,
And that can be turned on and off.
okay, because maybe you didn't want it to do that. That's the thing with the cameras. Each person may use it a little bit different, and it really helps if you have the ability to turn something on and off like that. So maybe one photographer loves that, and another one hates it. Being able to turn it on and off
Right,
is very useful. Just like that AF-on button I was talking about.
right.
That's definitely a setting. You can turn that on. You can I think you can reprogram that AF-on to be something else in case you didn't like it. If you didn't like having that back button in it, if you're used to hitting the shutter, there is a learning curve to using that back button. But I feel that now I've used it, I like it better that way. It's more natural. It's me. It's the way I'm shooting is more natural. Someone else may not like it, and they may want to, not turn that setting on.
Right.
So
I had never used it, and for me, it was the oddest thing in the world to get used
yeah,
to. But
it is.
getting used to it also, though.
It is very odd at first. So going back to baseball, what was your see? We got a picture here up of your son pitching.
Right.
What did you find is the most challenging thing about taking pictures of your son in baseball?
Um, the most challenging. I almost don't want to say it's like the where I was able to take pictures because I pretty much had free range of where I wanted to take pictures. They never questioned me on that. It was the biggest challenge was at this age was actually getting a decent shot because the kids move around a lot. You can see the kid in the background here is kind of like not paying any attention to what's going on. So
Right.
that the challenge was more or less the focus of the kids to actually play the game. And the batter and the pitcher was actually the easy part. But any of the other players out there, I was one of the assistant coaches at the same time as I was doing this, so that's why it was a little easier for me to get out on the field to take these pictures. But just getting them to be in a baseball ready position was painful.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me, one of the challenges when I went to shoot baseball, softball, was field access. And you'd run into refs. I think I ran into this more often than I did not run into it. Refs that would not allow you on the field whatsoever. So you can be if it was more of a how you say that, recreational,
Recreational.
yeah, team maybe, they would let you in the dugout and you could shoot from the dugout, but actually getting onto the field anywhere, they didn't let me do that. So often I'd have to shoot either over the fence or, and I think I've talked about this before, shoot through the fence.
Well,
Um,
I think one of the pictures I sent you, I definitely have through the fence. and that was right behind the plate. But I mean, there were times like at the All-Star game they had this season, I was literally laying on the ground about 15 feet from home plate, about 5 feet off the line, the right field line, and I mean, the only questions I got was, "You're going to get hit in the head with a baseball."
So they let you get on the field and lay down. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, because this was 9-year-old kids. Nobody really questioned it. But every once in a while you'd see some of the sports where they had the high school players playing, and first of all, you wouldn't want to be anywhere near that because if the
Yeah.
ball hits you, it's gonna hurt. I
Yeah.
mean,
They
the
knock you
the
out.
level of play is a lot different from a 9-year-old to a 16 or a 17-year-old, or even a 9-year-old and now a 12-year-old. It changes so much.
Yeah, and if you're like me and you're staring through the lens, it's often hard to tell, what the dangers are around you. So you really got to be careful, especially as those kids get older and they're hitting things harder. Um, so, JC out in chat is asking, are people walking in front of you? If you're laying down on the ground like that, are people walking in front of you, getting in the way and getting
Now,
you a
not
shot?
when I was that close, or all the other times since I was the assistant coach, it kind of gave me a little bit more leeway, I think, than if I was one of the other parents trying to take pictures. I was usually up by first base or up by third base as the coach, but I had my camera with me, so nobody else was walking out in the field. The first base umpire was about 20 feet deep behind me. Then you had the players out on the field, so I never had an issue with somebody walking in front of me.
Okay. And what did you like as far as a lens? Which lens did you like to use in both the focal length and maybe even the aperture?
Well, I think like the one you're showing right now up there, that might have been my 85 1.4, and I was trying to blur the background out, so I probably had it stopped down very low on this.
I tell you, in this image, I love the depth of field. It may be a little bit hard to see live, but the depth of field here is really good. You got the ball that's in, it may be a little bit out of focus. It's maybe at the edge of the depth of field, but your son is in good depth there, and it's just I love that look,
Right.
that
That's
blurred look.
exactly what I was trying to get. I wanted to get the player and the ball kind of separated from everything else. You got the advertisement in the back, which you cannot read, which is
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted out of this picture.
And that is often a problem in any of these sports is going to be what's behind you. And often there's not much you can do. I don't know what angle you could have possibly gotten unless you're laying in front of your son there, looking straight up at him, which would be interesting, but they probably wouldn't let you do that. There's not much angle you can get that you're going to be able to not have distractions in the background. But by blurring it like this, that helps limit them.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if I could find the picture in Lightroom to see what I actually had the setting at.
Now, when I was shooting, because I didn't have the same field access as you, an 85 would not have been long enough. So I was shooting with one of two lenses. I would shoot with either the 70 to 200, 2.8, or the my 120 to 300, 2.8. And those generally gave me enough room. If I'm in the dugout, the 70 to 200 would be fine for, depending on which side of the field I was on, either first base or third base, maybe second base, the pitcher and the batter. The outfield is going to be a stretch, even for the 300 millimeter. The outfield is going to be a stretch to get that, because what you don't want is the player to be really small in the image. That's not going to um, generally be that good.
Yeah, and this was at a 1.4 on my 85 lens.
Okay. Yeah, the 85. I'm not. Now that's the Sony. I imagine it's like the Nikon. The 85 is a wonderful lens. A lot of lenses, though, if you shoot with them wide open, they're not going to be at their best. This one looks pretty good.
I was pleased with this one. I mean, it may not
Yeah.
be a perfect picture, and I'm pretty sure what I wound up doing. I didn't look to see, but I might even have had this set up as manual focus, just so that it would not
Yeah.
change. Because a lot of times that's what's going to happen. Because obviously I don't have the focus set to dead center, so either
Yeah.
I pre-focused it or I had it set to manual focus. And offhand, I'm not sure.
And I was about to bring that up, that this is a good example of I don't know if it's exactly following the rules of third, because I don't exactly know the rules of third, but I know the basics, and that is you've put him off to the right third, and he's throwing into the left third, and that's a much better looking image, much more pleasing than if you had him dead center.
Yeah, I definitely always, that's one thing I always focus in on. And especially if I ever get somebody else to take a picture for me, or I try to teach somebody, don't put somebody dead center ever. I rarely will take pictures where I have somebody dead center in a picture, especially if you're taking vacation pictures. Put them off to the side, or try and lead a person's eye. I mean, the rule of thirds is something I probably learned a long time ago, and I try to do it in a lot of my pictures. And if I don't get the picture that way, I'll probably more than likely edit it post processing to get it into the rule of thirds.
Yeah. And now another important thing that is going to really apply across at least all the outdoor sports is what metering did you use? And maybe this is the same for all brands, but on a Nikon, you basically have spot, center weighted, and matrix.
Yeah, this was me. I'm sure this was more often than not. I'm using Matrix.
And that's what I have found too. When I'm shooting outdoor sports, matrix metering is generally the best. Now, what I have to watch for is, let's say I've got a team that's white jerseys or black jerseys, or there's a really strong um, color in not brightness in the background or really dark in the background. Matrix media may get a little messed up with that, but generally it'll get less messed up than something like center weighted, and definitely less messed up than spot. Because with center and spot, you're going to have to make sure you're dead on that where you've got that spot, or else when you get off a tad, bam, it's going to focus, not focus, it's going to meter off that other thing. So what I generally do is set it on matrix, take a few test shots, look at, is the subject in being exposed properly, and then you can do the plus or minus exposure that we've talked about in previous shows. The EV setting where you can add exposure or subtract exposure.
Well, I'll tell you, I just looked at the setting on this also. I did have this set as a manual, and
Hmm.
I'm sure I set it down to 1.4, and the shutter speed on this was 1/8,000th.
One
So I mean,
eight
this
thousandth.
at
Yes.
ISO 100. So I mean, this was max on both sides. It was the top of my shutter is 1/8,000th.
1/8,000th and 100 ISO 100.
Yeah,
Wow, that must have been a really bright day.
yeah. What time was this? Because this might have been evening even, because you could see the shadows. So this was definitely the evening.
God, I don't know if I've ever taken anything at 1/8,000. I wonder what the top end of my camera is. That's interesting. I have to look that up now. 1/8,000 is really fast.
What time was this picture taken?
So, you're coming up to another one of your photos, and it's not all about the action. It's not just taking pictures of bat on ball, which if your goal is to get bat on ball, and that's really fun to get bat on ball, but it's also very difficult, and not as even when you're sitting there with my camera taking 8 frames per second, you would think one of those 8 frames is going to have bat on ball every time, and more than likely not. More than likely, it's not going to have
Right.
bat on ball. So you got to get a little bit of the timing down to when you start the 8 frames per second versus you know when the ball is coming in, to hopefully time it to get that. And it's at least at my level of skill, it's more luck than it is skill.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm gonna cheat a little bit and give the my tip of the day, because
There you go.
this is exactly where this really comes up. And the tip of the day on this one is, and this takes a lot of practice. I shoot with both eyes open, so one eye is looking in the viewfinder, and the other eye is open to see when is the pitcher throwing the ball, so that I can time my shot when the ball's getting there. So, because otherwise you're really you're shooting blind otherwise.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I do. I've got to where I can tell by the reaction of the batter that the ball's about to come, but it's not as precise as what you're talking about. I'm waiting for them, to rear up, and you can tell they're about to come down with it, and that's when I start. But it would be better if I was seeing what the pitcher was doing. Yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely, and actually where I think I started it, because it was well before I did sports photography, and I'm not even sure who taught me or where I learned this, but if you're taking pictures of people in a crowded place, and people are going to walk in front of you, like JC had talked before, I'm looking to see, is somebody going to walk in the frame on me? And I
Yeah.
think I did this before when I had a film camera. So I'm doing this for quite a long time, probably 7, 8 years now, where making sure somebody's not about to walk in the picture before you take it. So I taught myself a long time ago to shoot with both eyes open the vast majority of the time, and that's definitely helped, especially on pitching. You could see when the ball's coming to the batter. I mean, for the pitcher itself, you can see if you're just taking pictures of the pitcher, it's easy because you can actually see the pitcher winding up. But for the batter, you got to see what's happening outside of that view.
Hmm. Yeah. Now this next photo, you're it must be either after the game, right before the game.
That's
So
actually before the game. That's the All-Star game.
okay, they're all cheering each other, getting ready for the game. And the one of the things I loved about sports photography was the emotion. The excitement in the kids' faces, or the sometimes when they have that mad look in their faces, just the emotion in the face, and not just the players. A lot of times it's the parents or other things going on the side. So don't always focus on just the action in the game. Some of the action before the game or after the game, like this shot before the game, is an excellent time to get some really good photos.
Yeah, you get the stuff that you're not going to see otherwise, and you really
Right.
have to have the camera with you all the time.
You do.
And just for the because this moment probably didn't last more than 10 seconds. And if I had to say, "Oh, let me go get my camera," it's not going to work.
Right. All right. So tell me about this one.
All right, this was the All-Star game as well, and uh, the pitcher was warming up, so I crouched behind the uh, the catcher to see, just as if I was the umpire, and I wanted to catch the ball in flight on the way to me. And I'll tell you, during this picture here, or this group of pictures, I probably took about 30, 40 pictures like this. I don't think I was more nervous than at this point
Because
because I
basically,
could see what was coming. Because I
basic,
don't think I was shooting with both eyes open on this. I was really focusing in on the action because I knew when to look for the ball coming at me. But this I was really nervous because that's the catcher's mask right in front of me, and I was less than uh less than a foot off the back of the catcher.
so yeah, basically you're sitting there with people throwing balls at you really fast.
Yeah, and hoping the catcher's going to catch it. Or I mean, at the 9-year-old level, I mean, they don't have the most accurate pitches.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that was good. All right. So here we have another one. I guess sliding into maybe third. You'll see it
Yeah,
here in a
sliding
second.
into third. And I like this picture. And this was one of those where it's not easy to get because you could take 100 shots and you get nothing out of it. But I think in this picture, the you actually saw the ball right there. It's the umpire on the left. You could see the ball coming right at him. So the
Yeah.
guy slid in right before the ball reached him.
Yeah. And I love and one of the things I like in softball, baseball is the dust clouds whenever they
Right.
come running in.
It gives that sense of action in a still shot.
Yeah. Yeah. It does because you're probably again a very high shutter speed, so you're stopping everything, but that dust lets you know that he's just slid in the third. Yeah, very good. Okay, I'm not sure. I don't like I said before, I don't have these in a particular order, so we're just going to go through them. And this is what I have coming up next is one of mine. So we kind of co-mingled our shots, and this is at one of the softball games. And one of the things I had is this was an after work softball game. So the lighting was generally just god awful. I mean, it was if the game started at 6:30, that meant that the game started with me shooting at let's say 1/500th of a second at ISO 500.
Wow.
The game would end with me shooting at maybe 1/200th of a second at ISO 1600, and that's with a f2.8 lens. So, what I would generally do when lighting got so bad I could no longer take photos, any action photos or anything that was going to be worth shooting, is I'd turn my attention to, the people in the dugout and start taking those kind of pictures. And you often, then you can go with a lower shutter speed, maybe you ought to go with a wider lens, or maybe even go down to the 50 millimeter or the 85 millimeter lens where I can get even a
Right.
1.8 shutter speed and then I can get some non-action shots, but of people that are interesting, people smiling, doing that kind of stuff. Um, and I don't want to stay on that one. Okay, here's one that got some action in. So one of the things I try and do, like you were doing, is I try to anticipate the action coming in. So if you got a person running to, let's say, second base or whatever, I try and anticipate, the ball coming in, the runner coming in there, and just start, as they get close, just start banging away on the shutter. And sometimes you get a shot like this. There's the person sliding in the second,
Right.
and the girl who is in the middle with the mitten, the her mitt
The
covering her
glove up.
face. They had just thrown the ball at her. I think she actually caught it. I'm not sure. She actually caught it, and that, just as a little side note, that is actually Jenny from show number one with the glove covering her face. She's actually a very good softball player. She just sometimes likes to protect her face from balls hitting her.
Nothing wrong with that sometimes.
Yeah, so that, but I love that shot because of the same reason you said on the other one, is the dust coming up. The other thing I got to pay attention to is your framing, because a lot this can be difficult when you have people running around and all the movement, is you can very easily cut off the bottom, the top, heads of people or the feet of people, and it's almost never right to cut off the heads. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing, you can cut off the lower body, but there's certain spots where, if you cut off at a certain spot, it just looks unnatural. If you cut off halfway through the knees or something like that, or right below the knees, it doesn't look quite right. So you really want to be watching your when you're looking through the viewfinder, watching that to make sure you're not cutting anything off. And that, that's, if you haven't done much sports photography, that can get that's a little harder than what you think.
Yeah, it's not as easy as you would think it is. And this is where you almost have to have a an SLR type camera. You
Right.
you cannot be using a point and shoot to get a lot of these shots.
Now, this is not technically a bat on ball, and I've had some, but this is one where I got close to a bat on ball. It's right before the bat's hitting there, which meant, even at 8 frames per second, the next scene, the ball is probably almost out of the frame.
Yeah, it's
She,
past the guy in red because
yeah,
it goes flying off then.
yeah, she hit it and it went flying back the other way, and that's, even at 8 frames per second, that's is moving too fast through the frame. So, like I mentioned before, I like getting people and their emotions in the game and not just the action. So in this shot I have coming up, I've got a guy here. It's not great because there's a little bit of the fence uh, right almost on top of him, and it's a little odd in how it's got that shadow there.
Right on
But
the right hand side.
yeah, but he is, and if you look at this in full resolution, I mean, I was able to shoot this at, I think, ISO 100, and you can even see the sweat beads on him and all that stuff. And he's just, smiling. He's happy, having a fun game. So I love that shot. And I've gone over this next one before, but yeah, again, when I have bad lighting, I often will go turn to the people in the dugout and start shooting them. And this is actually Kristen from show number one, uh, and where I've done the selective coloring, and left the color in her eye while I made her black and white.
And this is also another one where you definitely had this waist stop down.
I did. I was probably shooting with my 85 millimeter at either f1.8 or f2.
Yeah, I mean you could definitely tell this is stop down.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily want to go through every one of these and talk about them. We'll just flip through a few of these real
Yeah,
quick.
like this picture you have here,
Yeah.
you're not going to get any pictures on the field. You could tell
Yeah.
it's dark and
And I don't know if I have that in here somewhere, but one of the other things, and you mentioned this before, the the color, like in a gym, the color of the light in a gym is just awful.
right. It's those sodium lights and it's
And if you're shooting like I just was, shooting a softball game under sodium lights outside, it's gonna be awful. Um, and if you're shooting outside in a normal day where it's not like a bright day like you had, let's say that you have clouds coming and going and something like that, you may get slight variations in your white balance. And if you are setting your camera on auto white balance, which I'd imagine a lot of people do, set their white balance on auto white balance,
yeah. I usually keep it on auto.
you might get a slight change in your white balance. And cameras under outdoor lighting are generally pretty good at doing auto white balance. under sodium lighting, under actually indoors, they're not that good. They're usually pretty awful.
Well, and
It's
the
been
good thing
my
with that is that's half the reason I probably shoot in RAW was just for the white balance to be able to adjust it easily.
absolutely white balance set changes in raw are really easy. I mean, it's assuming you have something to read off of, and that's what the case is. This what I'm doing here. So I'm shooting outside. I'm shooting a softball game under sodium lights, and the lighting is just god awful. It's got this horrible yellow cast, and the what I didn't think I'd have anything to choose as a white balance adjustment later in post. So I generally carry around a gray card. Now, maybe Tim, maybe you know more about this than me, but that gray card I got there in that photo is what I would typically call gray. But I think for digital photography, they use a slightly different gray than the old 18% gray.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the things, and I have not been comfortable enough with it to get into it. I mean, they even have there's a cap that you put on the lens itself, and it shoots through it to get itself to the white balance. But I have not made myself comfortable at all, and I haven't really tried it to make any comment on white balance.
And I think that is called the Expo disc,
Yeah, I
the
think
thing
that's
you talk
it.
about.
That's the one.
I've not tried that, but if you've got Scott Kelby's Lightroom book, in the back of the book, he has a card that you can tear out, and it's about the same size as the one we're showing there in the photo, about an 8.5 by 11 size, gray card. And I pulled it out, and then I'm comparing it to the gray card you see that I'm using there in that shot. And wow, the grays are dramatically different. The gray in the one in the back of Scott Kelby's book is much closer to white. It's not nearly as gray. And maybe I need to do a little research on that to see, uh, what the difference is there and how much of a difference it makes. But by using a gray card, either the one that's like in the back of Scott Kelby's book or the one I'm using there, you take a shot of somebody holding or just the shot itself of the gray card in the scene under the light that you're shooting, and then you go and just shoot the rest of your shot, your shoots, your shots, whatever.
Right.
And then in post, like in Lightroom, I can set the white balance on that one image and copy it to all the rest. Now, copying it to all the rest, one of the things I do is I don't shoot in auto white balance. I generally set my white balance either just to 5600 and just leave it there, or I actually do a reading off of that gray card to set it, manually set the white balance under those settings. I generally do not do that, but I've done that, where you can use a gray card or use something, a white wall or something like that, to say this is gray, set this to gray, and the camera will do that, and then use that as the white balance. Have you ever tried that?
Nah, you know what? I dabbled a long time ago, and probably not even with my current camera. It was probably my previous SLR, and I no, I haven't done it. I got to
Yeah,
be honest, and I probably need to.
the much easier way, if you're not used to doing what the way I just mentioned, is to just get a gray card, shoot one image with it in there. You don't have to have a person holding it. You can just lay it on the ground, just make sure you get a picture
Right.
with the light, and then use that later in post to edit all your other photos. And Tim, if you're out there shooting your son and you're getting 8,000 of a second shutter speed, you probably got incredible light, and white balance is not really a problem. But if you're in a gym, yeah, that's generally going to be a
Yeah,
problem.
indoor pictures where I mean, in my outdoor pictures, I don't have the problem. At least I don't think I do, even when I look at the pictures afterwards.
Yeah.
But indoor pictures is I should carry a gray card with me. I need to get one actually.
I got
Matter of fact, I think the back of Scott Kelby's book that I have has a gray card in it.
it does. If you got the one in Lightroom, it does have
Yeah,
one.
I have the one from Lightroom.
Yeah, and I got to, if you can see this girl's posing with the thing with the gray card. It got to where everybody wanted to at the beginning of the game. Can I be the light card, the white card model, the gray card model, whatever? So that it became a fun event. And I guess we need to get moving, get off of softball, but I wanted to show one more picture here. And this is just as Jenny again from show number one. And she had just cut her thumb open or something. She wasn't really pouting. She did that when I looked over at her. And of course I picked up my camera super fast, took a photo before she was able to get rid of that look. And I'm sure she's regretting letting me get a picture of that.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Can you delete that?
Yeah, so let me go out and get. Let's see. Now we had. Let's go to soccer.
Well, does anybody out in chat have any questions on the softball or baseball?
And I think I got too many soccer ones here, so I'm going to flip through till I find one that I want to talk about. Okay, I kind of want to talk about this one. Not this one, but the one coming up. You know, I don't know about you, Tim, but when I shot soccer, one of the challenges was you'd have some kids that were just superstars and dominated the game, and you'd have other kids who could go the whole game and not touch the ball at all.
Yeah, you know what? I've seen that for both baseball and soccer,
Yeah.
and and when I take pictures now, I actually try to keep like a number pad with me of who's on the team to try and make sure I equalize out or if not equalize, at least make sure I have pictures of all the kids.
Yeah, and that's something. What I did something very similar is at the end of the season we'd have a party, and while the kids were eating and waiting to get their trophies and doing all that kind of stuff, I would play a DVD of the images from the season in the background. So when I first started thinking about doing this early on in my son's, uh, you know, playing of soccer, I realized, oh crap, if I don't pay attention, I'm going to end up with 100 of this one kid and one of this other one.
Right.
So what I ended up doing is not just I started keeping track of the keepers, not just the ones I took, but the ones that were actually good. I would put them in. I created a folder of every kid. It also helped me know their names. But by third game into the season, I knew every kid's name on that team, and then I would sort those photos, the keepers, into a folder, and I would say, all right, we're halfway through the season. I've got 100 of this kid and two of this other kid. For the next few games, I am going to focus heavy on this one kid, and that's difficult if that kid doesn't do anything. If that kid is not playing much, what do you do? So one of the things I would do is look for other times. Sometimes what the coach does is, all right, I know you're not getting much action. I'm going to let you throw the ball in, or I'm going to put you in goalie or something like that. So, a case like this where a kid is about to throw the ball back into play, uh, I make sure I get pictures of that. Another time is right before the game starts. They're practicing, they're getting ready for the game. They're in their
Right.
uniform.
Nobody knows they're not out on the field playing the game.
Absolutely, because they're in their uniforms.
Right. It all looks the same at that point.
Yep. And I don't know about your team, but what ours sometimes would do is they would line up, get in a row, and be kicking the ball into the goal. If you get at the right angle, you can isolate that kid and make it look like he was driving into the goal. Maybe you can't see the goal, but you can see he's driving the ball. And it looks like, wow, that kid was a superstar. And you never realize that, nah, he never really did anything with the ball.
I actually had Jack last year was doing that because he plays goalie for our team, and he saw me on the sideline. I had my 400 millimeter lens on, and I was easily 100 feet away from him, and he could see that I was zoomed in on him, and he started making fake diving shots because the ball was on the other half of the field. So I actually posted, I think, one of those pictures on my Flickr account, and somebody tagged it as great save. I was like, yeah, if they only knew.
Yeah, that is the thing you want in that whenever the parents look at it or you look at it, and especially if you're doing it after the season like I did, you want those kids to look at that and go, oh, look how good I was, or whatever. This shot I got here, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see even more, is my son. He's in goalie and he's making a face that I thought was just really good. I love to get those grimacing looks as the ball is coming toward them, or
Right.
or especially in soccer. Another time to get it is as they're about to impact, as two players are impacting each other. That's a time to get a shot of them coming in.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the other things that I started having issues with because with soccer, I'm a lot further away in soccer than I was with baseball. And I was taking pictures, not this past weekend, the weekend before, and my son was going to make a great save, and the camera would not focus in on him. It was focusing to the person that was 20 feet away from him. So the great save he was making of him is completely out of focus. So what I'm going to have to work on is probably manually setting the focus to the predetermined area of where he's going to want to be, because it just came out terrible. That it was disappointing because it was like one of those. I try to get shots of Jack for a calendar every year that I give to my mother and to my mother-in-law, and that was one of the ones that's like, well, that would have been the perfect one, but oh well.
Yeah, that's one of the things with soccer is now you're saying you have worse field access in soccer?
Well, not that it's worse, but I'm definitely further away. I mean, like I said, I was 15 feet away from the plate for the baseball. Now I'm at midfield, pretty much taking the shots of the game. So even though I'm on the sideline, it was not as good for the goalie at least.
Okay. Yeah, because
And
I
I
guess
didn't have, and matter of fact, I didn't have my monopod, so that didn't help me either. So I was not, as we talked about the last show, I was not prepared.
yeah. And for me, couldn't get as good access for softball, and I got, for soccer, you're always right there, up against the field. Now it depends on what age, because the younger kids, they have a smaller field, of course, and then the bigger kids, like my older son, when he was playing, geez, those fields were huge, and you were generally going to have to pick which part of the field you were going to shoot at and just stick there. I was not one that ran up and down the field. So my approach for soccer was I'd like to get there before the game starts so I can do some test shots, especially if there's another team playing, maybe if I'm getting the back end of another team playing. Get there, take a few test shots, get my exposure, thinking about my exposure. Um, then also, as soon as those parents would leave from the game before us, scout out where I'm going to sit. I generally do not sit midfield. So if I find out where the sun is and where the sun's going to be at my back, and so I'll be shooting with the sun in the face of the kids running toward me, I'll get toward that end of the field and just stay there. And then that way I get the kids coming that way. Now, if the sun was like directly overhead, or was behind me on that side of the field, so that it didn't matter what part of the field I was going to be on.
Right.
Then I would find out, all right, which direction is my team going on the opening of the game? Are they going left to right or right to left? And if they're going, I would want to be in the direction they're driving toward, because shots of people's backs generally are no good. If you don't get the face or the front end, it's generally not that good of a shot. And then at halftime they would flip over and I would go down to the other end, because most parents are going to want to stay in the middle. They're going to all be fighting for that 50-yard line spot. I don't want the 50-yard line spot. I want like the 20-yard line spot.
Right. You want something different from everybody else.
Yeah, because that way I get them driving toward me. I'm also, I might also switch ends and go try and get our goalie, get shots of our goalie. That's good. If you have a really long lens, you might be able to go down by your goalie and shoot them driving that way. They did not like us being behind the goalie.
No, I got kicked out of back there once.
I know. That's one of the reasons I brought that up.
Yeah, I got kicked out.
Now, as we go through these photos, one of the things that comes to mind is horizontal or vertical. Yeah, I think in some of the softball ones you were shooting, some of the softball ones you were shooting, you were doing horizontal.
Right.
I don't remember if you had one vertical, and I've got to go in both ways. And I think it's good to mix them up. A person is vertical. So if you're trying to isolate the person, vertical works really good. But the one thing with vertical, you don't get to see a lot of the side action. You don't get to see a lot of the other things that are going on. So like in a shot I got up now, I like this one because I've isolated, this is my son, my youngest son. I've isolated him. I actually have a pretty good framing here, and I'm not always this good, but I'm not cutting off any part of him. And I have
the ball. I mean, this is perfect.
The ball down there. I probably don't have anywhere near the shutter you're talking about, but I got pretty decent action. And but the one thing you don't see is any other things going on around them.
No, I think that's a great. I mean, and you could talk about the rule of thirds. I mean, you really have it in this shot as well, because his head's up in the upper right quadrant, the ball's in the bottom left quadrant. So I mean, this is a good picture.
I think so.
I mean, it's a little dark on this one. I think it looks like it was probably a little overcast for this picture, but sometimes those overcast pictures are also good because the lighting is more pleasing on the faces.
Yeah, I think the one thing is, as we're looking at them here in the chat or the broadcast, is they're not coming across as good as what they are on the computer, what we're really seeing. So it's hard to judge too much of the sharpness here or the color. Now, what I'm about to show here is one of yours that is vertical, and I think this shows where horizontal, where horizontal comes into play too. You get to see a lot of the action that's going on. So I actually like to mix it up. Take pictures horizontal, take pictures vertical, you know, get action both isolated of the player, get action like this where you've got multiple players coming in, looks like a player driving toward a goal and the goalie trying to stop the ball. That's good action too.
Right. That's what I try to get. And Jack is pretty good at diving at people's feet to block the ball off. So I know it's going to happen. And I know my wife's always like, "Oh my God, he's going to get hurt again." But
Yeah.
thank God she's on the other side of the field when he's doing these things.
Yeah, and you mentioned focus before. Focus is challenging in these cases because you've got kids, running in front of each other. You've got them getting really close to each other, and maybe the focus picking up on I think the focus picks up on the thing that it sees the most contrast in.
Right.
So, maybe it sees more contrast in the blue jersey than it does in the orange jersey, and it flips the focus over to that person. And you'd have to zoom in here, but a lot of times in these soccer shots, you can't really do this that well on the field. You'd have to do it when you got back home. But a lot of times in these soccer shots, you can look at the grass and you can see where the focal plane was, where your in focus spot was, you know, um, and a lot of times when I look at it on the back of my camera, I go, "Oh, that was good. That was a good shot." I get home and it's not. It's not. And I
Right. You
blow it
look at it
up.
and say, "Oh, it was off focus."
Yeah, it's off focus. And you can look at the ground and you can see, the focus was right behind them. Maybe it's like a foot behind them, and that's
This
that's another
this is
reason.
where you almost need to take with the higher ISO, so the you're not stopped down. You can't be taking these shots at a 2.8. You almost need to be at like an f8 or an f12 or something, so that you have a deeper focal plane here.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever gone that high. I like a little bit of a blur, but
So do I.
you're
But
right.
sometimes it's
I
got difficult on this.
Yeah, I would, and it also depends upon how many players you want to have in focus. In this case, maybe you wanted to have more in focus, so you definitely want to stop down some. But if you're trying to isolate a player, you're right. At f2.8, you got such a small part in focus, and my lenses, even at 70 to 200 Nikon, which is not a cheap lens, that's a expensive lens. It's not going to perform its best at 2.8. So I might shoot at 3.2, 3.5, maybe even f4, or even go as high as 5.6
Yeah, this
to
this picture was f6.3 at 1/320th at 300
uh,
millimeters.
1/320th. Oh, 320th of a second. Yeah.
Yeah, 3/20th of a second, and the focal length was 300 millimeters.
Yeah. Now I think if you can't tell in here, but if you were to zoom in at 320, 1/320th of a second, you don't quite freeze the action. There's a little bit of blur in the foot movement and the hand movement and the ball, and that's not necessarily bad. I mean, sometimes having that little bit of motion blur adds something to the image. But that's something that I think a lot of first time shooters forget about is what they get out there shooting and they forget all about the shutter speed. So let's say it's getting darker and when you started you were at 1/500 and you're not paying attention, now you're down to 1/80th of a second.
Right,
At 1/80th of a second, you're not it's none of them are going to come out that well. You're going to be lucky if you got a good shot.
right. You're gonna be very disappointed in the end.
Yeah. So you just especially if it's changing lighting conditions, you want to be watching out for that. All right, let me flip through here so we can get through a few more. All right. When a player gets hurt, I generally put my camera to the side and do not take any more pictures of them because I don't want to get involved in taking a shot of a player hurt. But in the case of a kid that's just overly dramatic and not really hurt, they
Soccer
sometimes
players never do that.
they sometimes can make some really interesting faces, and I like to get those players with those interesting faces. They also, I don't know if you've run into this, a lot of them like to stick their tongues out or do different things with their tongues. Um,
It's amazing how many kids you see, or how many people. I mean, even professional players will have their tongue out when they're doing something.
Yeah, so you see this little girl here. I'll
Looks like
zoom.
she's poking her tongue through her cheek.
Yeah, I'll zoom in on her face. You can see that she's sticking her tongue out or sticking her tongue against her cheek. I guess I just can't help it.
Not a video.
Okay, here's one more tip I got for us. So if you're taking a bunch of shots, if you're out there taking a bunch of games, let's say I've got my son has a doubleheader, or maybe both my sons have a game that day. It generally, if two sons are gonna have a game, I can tell which the games are. But if you have multiple games and you can't, you want a way to tell when one game starts, one game ends, or one game ends and one another game starts. What I have done in the past is take a picture of the ground, and that is my break point between the two games. So if you
You
just
know,
go,
I do that also for when I take HDR photos. I'll
yeah,
shoot the ground before and after, so I know when I'm going through in Lightroom. Oh, this was a sequence that I did for some other reason. Yeah,
yeah, doing something like that, taking a shot that you know is not intentional, uh, is a good way to break up a set. So, like you said, when you take an HDR, or if you're taking other things that you want a way to, and when you bring them into your computer, to break them up into sets. Taking a shot of something, and I generally like to do the grass, something I can repeat, because I don't want each breaking image to be something completely random and different, because then it's going to be harder to find in the set. And I'm going to move off one. Let's go through a couple more of these real quick. I also like to get when the kids are at halftime and talking to the coach. You
I
know,
agree.
in the center of the field. That's good. Um, I'm just gonna flip through here. There's none of these that I really want to talk about. And we'll stop on this one coming up. So I also sometimes take pictures that you generally would not think to take because it has not much use. But this shot here, where I just got a lone soccer ball that there really is no action going on. This is a shot that later I can use to put some text on it and use it maybe for the intro of the DVD that I'm going to do with
Absolutely. Yeah,
parents.
yeah,
So
I agree.
yeah, so sometimes so we talked about not just taking the action, taking the parents, the siblings, or something on the sidelines, taking the coach's reaction, or also taking shots of something that you wouldn't necessarily think about taking shots of that you could use later for other purposes, like the case of this ball.
Right. This is something you could put on the DVD cover or something with the title on the side of it. Then.
Yeah. So my last one, and I only have two photos here, so this won't take too long, is basketball. Basketball, I've shot probably less than 10,000 shots of basketball, which sounds like a lot, but
Yeah, less than 10,000.
basketball is difficult because the action is especially if you're shooting like high school or lower basketball, the lighting is god awful. The action is going to be fast, and there's going to be a lot of people have access to the the court area, so there's going to be a lot of action going on. So in this case, my favorite lens to take photos of basketball is the 85 millimeter, 85 1.8, and I will be at 1.8 or f2 on that. And so not only am I at that, I'm at ISO 1600.
Wow.
And now you can't tell as good in this scene, but the white really comes through, pretty good as white. If you looked at this image before I white balance adjusted it, she looked like she was wearing a pale yellow outfit because the sodium lighting was just that god awful.
Yeah, you have to adjust every picture after this.
Now, what you don't want to do is, flash is not going to do you much good here unless you're going to flash the player directly. And I never wanted to do that because as a photographer, me personally, I like to be kind of hidden. Like, you
Right,
know,
you're drawing it. I was gonna say you're drawing attention to
yeah.
yourself.
Like this girl I'm taking a picture here. I was there taking pictures of her team because her mom wanted me to come take pictures. And one of my goals would be for her to after the game go to her mom and say, "I thought you said Mr. Mike was going to come here and take pictures. I never saw him."
Hmm.
Like, I know I was here. I took all the kind of pictures. So if you have a flash and you're banging away with it, you're going to stand out. And especially if you're down by the goal and you're banging away as they're jumping up, the last thing I want to do is hit them in the eye and cause them to miss a shot and then cause a scene because of that. I do not want to become part of the game. Um, you also cannot bounce it off the ceiling because the ceiling is going to be
It's
way
way
too
too high
high.
up. Right.
So for me, unless you have mounted strobes in the ceiling, which, by the way, the professionals do that, and I think a lot of colleges do that. If you watch a professional basketball game, once you have seen the strobes go off, you will see it all the time now because you every professional basketball game you've seen, they have strobes going off all the time, but they're so fast that unless you're looking for it, you don't see it.
And a lot of them are also remote strobes that are multiple flashes for the same camera.
Absolutely. ESPN or some of the other people have put, $100,000 worth of strobes in the ceiling, and they've got them on remote, and they will, let other people use them sometimes. Uh, on, give them the channel or whatever it is
Right. So
for those strobes, and they have those strobes all over the place. So unless you're going to invest, $100,000 in your high school gym's lighting, you're generally just going to have to get by with what you can get by, which is going to be ISO 1600 or something like that. Now, a more recent camera, some of the newer cameras handle ISO 1600 much better. So that may not be as big of a deal for you. But again, I would set your white balance to manual. Either just pick a number, number 5600, whatever it is, or set it off of a gray card. And then, if you're not going to manually set it off of a gray card, take a shot with the gray card in the image and then set your white balance to a fixed setting like 5600 or something like that, and then you can adjust them all in post because
right.
it's going to.
That probably makes the most sense. Keep it locked in at one setting.
Yeah. And I just had one other image here in basketball. I didn't want to go too much over basketball, but as you can see in this next one of the things as you go, as I'm taking a picture of somebody jumping into the basket, getting ready to take a picture, and it looks a little darker on here than what it really is. You can see those sodium lights up in the ceiling. So if you had this set to matrix metering, or if you had it set to any of the manual metering modes, you would have exposures all over the place, and you would have tons of unusable images. So what I did is I just sit there and this is the one time I would use your way, Tim. I am no good at manual exposure except for when I have to. And I would manually set the exposure just by shooting up underexposed, shooting up underexposed, and just keep doing that until, okay, now it looks right. And then that's your exposure for the whole rest of the game.
Well, and that histogram really helps you get it to right where you need it.
Yeah, and you don't worry about the lights in the ceiling being a little blown out. You
No,
know.
because something's going to have to be blown. It's either going to be overexposed or underexposed the players. Then
Yeah. Yeah. Now the one tip I forgot to give is when you're taking any of these sports, and you mentioned that you did it when you were laying on the ground, is getting down, and I've mentioned this before, but getting down to the player's level.
correct.
If when you're laying that perspective of, especially when you're laying down, you're lower than the player. That perspective is so much nicer than the standing up. We had
Right.
a
You don't want to tower over them. You want them. It's more pleasing when you're down below them. I agree.
we had a the guy who was the team photographer for our soccer league, was like a 6'2", 6'3" guy, real big guy, and he would be sitting there shooting 5-year-olds standing up. So think about that. He is pointing straight down at those players, and that's just not going to be that pleasing of a shot. I would either sit at the 5-year-olds. I might even just sit on the ground. Uh, I did have a um, a chair I got from what it was called, not Home Depot, from Bass Pro Shop. I got this chair from Bass Pro Shop that was able to swivel. You ever seen one of those?
Yeah, I've seen them, and that actually makes the most sense for something like this.
Yeah, that allowed me to move around and take photos from different angles. I can turn around and have my camera on the tripod, and that helped out a lot. I was going to look and see if I can find it real quick on there, but I bet I'm not going to be able to find it. I probably should have found that before we started here. Um, okay. Anything else we want to add before we start getting ready to wrap up? We've gone
No,
a little bit
I have
past the
nothing
hour.
else unless somebody out in chat has something, but I think we covered it. But I agree that that one tip that you had just brought out, getting down low, and that goes for whether it's sports photography or not. On a kid, get down to that level.
You know what? I just found it and it won't come up. What is going on here? Great. Huh. Actually found the seat. And then whenever it was getting ready to come up, it didn't come up. Anyway, yeah, getting down to that level is good. Now, as far as this week's tip, you already kind of gave a tip.
Yep.
Is that, I guess that's going to be your tip. So now it's my turn. And what was your tip again? The rule of thirds?
No, no, keeping your eye open, both eyes open.
Okay. Um, let's see, I got a whole long list here that I wanted to do. And I think maybe I'll go with this one because this is one that we kind of talked about. And it really, in sports photography, is, the one you were doing with softball, when you do soccer, any of these things, is kind of watch your background. And that goes just not for sports. That goes for a lot, almost all of photography, I guess. Is watch your background. I've had images before when I'm taking shots of in soccer that it was a good shot, and you know what's right behind them? A big old trash can. And that's just, if I could clone it out, fine. If I couldn't clone it out, that was going to be an unusable shot. Or, if I took a whole bunch of them like that, I don't want to have to sit there and clone out, 100 different trash cans. So, you know, my tip there is to watch your backgrounds and try different angles to limit the impact of that background. Or like in the case what Tim did is, he shot wider open, and what that did was help him blur that out, and it wasn't as distracting. Those backgrounds can be very distracting if you're not watching them.
Absolutely. You want the focus to be what you're focusing in on.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will put that. I found it here, but for whatever reason, Bass Pro Shop's website is not acting correctly. So I will put that image into the show notes so people can see the little chair that I'm talking about. That it swivels. It's got like three legs. There's no back to it. You just sit on it and you can swivel around. It's meant for hunting, and it's really small and really easy to carry around. But it's what I used for most of my soccer shots. Now the like the teenagers, then you can get to where you can start standing up, and you don't need something like that. But like my sons were younger, I needed something where I can sit down and still move really good too.
Right.
All right. One more thing before we end, and that is, I talked about it, I think, before we started the live show, is I've got a number of shows out there now. I've caught up almost all of them. Hopefully, this one will be out by Thursday. One more, the one Tim and I did last week, should be out tomorrow, and that is the audio podcast, the two videos. The show notes will be following shortly after that. It'll be a little bit longer than that. Head out to the website. Join us in Flickr and join us on Facebook. I announced the shows coming up in Facebook. I also announced the show on Google Plus. If you are not a Google Plus member already and you want to be, email me at podcast at jpeg2RAW.com and I will send you a Google Plus invite. If you're on Facebook, go out and search for jpeg2RAW and like our page, and then you'll get updates from us. And also, you can follow me on Twitter, the show on Twitter, just by searching for JPEG2RAW. Tim, do you have a Twitter account or do anything like that?
Yeah, TJ Kemperle is my Twitter name.
Do you tweet out much?
No, I tweeted about the show today, but the last tweet before that was probably about last week's show.
Okay. Well, maybe you can email me your Twitter, however you want people to contact you. If you contact the show, you can contact either one of us. But if you want to contact Tim directly, you know, uh, think about that, how you want people to get a hold to you. Or I can create a account for you straight on JPEG to RAW if you want a separate one.
Yeah, we
Just
can
go for it.
determine that.
We'll talk about that later. The forums are still not very active. I have not been good about posting it. I need to get to where I make myself post something every day, but that's been a little more difficult than I would like as I try and catch up on all these shows.
And I'll have to force myself in there as well.
I've also
I'm just as bad. Don't worry.
I've considered, I don't know, maybe as we continue to, the show continues to grow, this is show number 9. Next week is show number 10. That's kind of a milestone. As we continue to grow, I've considered taking all the photos from each show and putting them as a separate Flickr group or something like that. I don't know. I think it kind of works in the show notes, but I am somewhat limited in the size that I can show in the show notes.
Right.
We're still, this is still in the early stages. We're at least I am. I don't know about you, Tim, but I learn every show things I did wrong, and hopefully will slowly improve.
I don't think you're doing anything wrong. It's all perfect.
I do think that I am liking Procaster better again. It was easier to use tonight. It's not quite as smooth going back and forth between images, but I don't think it's too painful to watch me resize the image. It's almost like I'm revealing more as I go through.
Actually, I preferred using the Procaster.
Good. Okay.
This was definitely better than last week. If my video stream would work, and I don't know if that's my computer upstairs as opposed to the one I used last week, I'll be back at my main computer next week, and hopefully that issue will be resolved.
Yeah, we'll keep working on that and try and get that worked out because I'm sure people would rather see your face than mine. We need to get some other distraction up there.
Well, just so everybody knows, I'm pretty much wearing the same shirt as Mike is today. It's blue with white and green stripes going across, and I got blonde hair. A little bit graying, but blonde.
Yeah, yeah, and we did not dress each other or anything. He's many states away from me, so we did this by accident. And out in chat they're saying they like this one better than last week. Yeah, I do too. I like I'm liking Procaster better. VidBlaster, as you noticed, I had a little trial thing there, and that VidBlaster is a really really nice program. But it's like the version we were using is $1,000,
Mm.
and I don't have any goals to make profit off of this show. I'm doing this for fun, so I will fund the show out of my own pocket, but I'm not going to fund that much.
No, that's well beyond funding.
Yeah. I do hope if you go to the site, you're at the site now if you're watching the live show, but if you ever, go around the show, the site, I do have some ads somewhere, like even above here, I have the Google analytics, not analytics, Google ads, whatever they are. And those are just to help offset some of the costs. I think so far they've made $1.65, so it's going to be a while before they help offset the cost. If you go to some of the pages, you'll see that there's an Amazon link. And if you're going to buy something off of Amazon already, clicking on that link will take you to Amazon, and then you buy whatever you want to buy, and the show gets a little bit of a credit, very small credit. It is no additional cost to the end user, to the customer buying from Amazon. It's just Amazon gives a little bit of a commission. Because I would like at some point for the show to help fund itself a little bit, you know.
I would agree with that. And I mean, there's obviously some other sites out there. B&H Photo. Hopefully, you can get added to it. That if people buy, I mean, that's where I actually want to buy a lot of my equipment because the prices are very competitive. And surprisingly, I think the reason I wound up going there, I knew what I was getting was a USA warranty versus gray market.
Yeah, I have the Google ad, the Amazon ad, and the Adorama ad. And I actually did try B&H because those were the ones I wanted, and B&H denied me.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't know what their restrictions were. They wouldn't say why. Maybe I didn't have enough traffic on the site. But we'll come back around to them, later when we have more traffic.
Well,
Yeah,
hopefully, when I go to buy my new camera, we have the
yeah,
ad for it.
yeah. Hopefully so. And the thing is, even if it doesn't, at this rate, I think most of the expense I'm in. I did have to build a new computer here, but I like doing that kind of thing anyway. So so at this point, it's as long as we keep liking doing it, we'll keep it going. I'm willing to keep funding it. That's not an issue. I'm not counting on that, and I definitely don't want it to make a profit. I'm not after it for that.
I
All
think
right.
you'd be a long way off before making a profit anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's not the goal here. So before we head out, anybody in chat have any questions for Tim or I, or anything you'd like to see in a future show? Tim and I have a list of show ideas and some article ideas, and now that I'm getting caught up on the shows, maybe I can start concentrating on articles as soon as I finish getting caught up. Um,
Right, but
but
sometimes other people have other ideas for shows that we're not thinking of.
absolutely, last week we had a question from
England.
England. Yes, a guy from England had an excellent question. So even if you don't have like a show idea, if you have a question that Tim and I can cover, maybe we don't even know the answer outright and got to research it, but that's fun too. If you I'm not putting you on the spot right now, chat, but if you think of one later, if you're listening to the show later, email us at podcast at jpeg2RAW.com, and we will, look at your question and hopefully, feature it on the show. All right. That's all I had for tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you for coming out, everybody.